Were the seeds of the Revolutionary War found in Judaism? And what does the miracle of Hanukkah have to teach us in 2018? This is Rabbi Yossi Madvig, and you're listening to Jews Did It First. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening, tuning in. Please leave a review, hopefully 5 stars of course, and also if you want to help contribute to keep the podcast going, I'd really appreciate it. Just go to jewisoswego.org/Jews Did It First, click on the donation button in the corner. And it would really help out. Sorry I haven't been so consistent. It's been really tough. Things have been pretty busy, especially with Hanukkah and everything. And that is actually what we're going to be talking about today. Now, everyone knows the basic story, I think, of both Hanukkah and the Revolutionary War. And I would contend that when it comes to the Revolutionary War, Jews did it first. So, as you know, the Revolutionary War, basically the story is that you had the English colonists in the what would become the United States in the 13 colonies in America, and they didn't like some of the things that were happening in the English government, and they were protesting. I say they, it was actually a very small percentage of people, were protesting some of the decrees that the English government was imposing upon the Americas. There was, the Stamp Act, and there was the I think it was called the Tea Act or something like that, where they had to basically pay all this extra money, and they were, for taxes. And their biggest thing, of course, as we all know, taxation without representation. And this led to things like the Boston Tea Party, which is sort of a precursor to the war. And the Boston Tea Party led to what were called the Intolerable Acts. And the Intolerable Acts were some edicts issued by the English government, the Parliament, mostly against the colony of Massachusetts, because that's where the Tea Party took place. And so you had, let's see, what were those acts? I actually had them up here a second ago, if I can go find them. But the acts were something about Boston Harbor. They lost Boston Harbor, control of that. And they also, the Boston Port Act, where they closed the port of Boston until the damages from the Boston Tea Party were repaid. There was the Massachusetts Government Act, where basically all government positions were appointed by Parliament. There was the Administration of Justice Act, where people could get a trial if they didn't feel that the trial would be fair in Massachusetts. They can go anywhere in the British Empire. George Washington famously called this the Murder Act because he thought that it would pretty much allow British officials to escape trial and so on by just leaving the country. And there was the Quartering Act, which allowed British troops to get quarters in residences within the Americas. That applied to all the colonies, not just Massachusetts. The others were just Massachusetts. And there is some debate whether or not they were allowed to quarter in residences of occupied homes. Some say that no, it was actually just unoccupied buildings, although we know from historical record that they did indeed occupy historical homes. If I remember correctly, it's mentioned sort of in passing in a book I read regarding Washington's spy ring in New York City. There were some troops quartered in living in occupied homes in Long Island. So there, whoever said, there was this historian, his name is David Ammerman. He claims that this, that oh, it's a total myth. They were only permitted to be quartered in unoccupied buildings. Well, maybe that's all they were permitted to do. I'm not sure. But certainly there are stories of, historical stories of troops living in actual occupied homes. So this led to a lot of resentment, which eventually fulminated into the Revolutionary War. And then again, you had this very small band of continental soldiers fighting the most dominant military power in the world at the time. And lo and behold, in a stunning, many would say miraculous victory, the Americans did defeat the British and established their independence. But as we will see, Jews did it first. So I want to just draw some parallels with the Revolutionary War and the Chanukah story. So the Boston Tea Party took place in 1773, but the actual war started in 1775 and ended in 1783. But Chanukah happened in the 160s BCE. So we're talking, a good 2,000, almost 2,000 years before that Revolutionary War. So that definitely qualifies as doing it first, I think. Now, there's amazing similarities between these two. First, again, you have the small army using guerrilla warfare tactics to go up against the most powerful army, certainly in the region. You had other big armies. You had the Roman army that was massing to the north, and you had also the Persian army out in the east. So there were other major world powers, but certainly the Greek Empire was not to be trifled with. And so that is one aspect which is sort of the easiest one to compare. Now, about these intolerable acts. Well, the Syrian Greek king, Antiochus, had his own intolerable acts. He outlawed Torah study. He outlawed the use of Jewish religious calendars. He outlawed circumcision. And, de facto, there were other things that were outlawed as well. And basically, for living a Jewish lifestyle, you were imprisoned or put to death, unless you, what was called Hellenized. You sort of incorporated the Greek lifestyle into the Jewish one. And in fact, it's much like you have today where a lot of Jews, and myself included, I consider myself an American. I don't consider myself, I'm certainly not Israeli. Yes, I'm Jewish and I'm American. And so do we incorporate American lifestyle things into our lives? Yeah, as a matter of fact, we do. We dress fairly normal, except for maybe those of us like myself that look like penguins. And we use iPhones, etc. And I'm here making a podcast, certainly a Western concept, not a Jewish thing per se. But here it's a little bit different in the Greek society because, first of all, a lot of it revolved around pagan practice, and there was some expectation to accept the Greek religious activities. And there was the gymnasium, which was certainly not so kosher, not very modest, not where a nice Jewish boy or girl should find themselves. And this was seen as anathema to this band of Jews that really wanted to fight back against this. Now, again, if let's say Jews close themselves off to these sorts of things in America, we're not going to be persecuted and killed. So definitely there's quite a difference there. But when you went against the British government, say back in the 1700s, if you did not follow these laws and you wanted to just be your own American entity, your own independent land, like the Jews wanted to have, because that's what they had historically, you were punished severely. So this was, again, another parallel, the intolerable acts of Antiochus, as opposed to those of King George. Now, two stories, they're really not a part of the general narrative. They're actual, more specific stories within the context of the revolution and Chanukah that I thought were quite amazing. One is a comparison between the infamous Agent 355 of Washington's spy ring and a woman named Hannah. Now, Agent 355 is shrouded in mystery. It's just a woman. It's not even 100% certain that it was a woman within the spy ring itself. She could have just been an ancillary person that they got information from. But she was actually captured. And when she was captured, she eventually died. And I believe it's believed that she died maybe in prison on a prison ship of the British, and she would gather information for the spy ring that Washington had in New York City. She was believed to have been in a very high position within society and to have had close contact with what's his name? Oh gosh, now I'm blanking. The guy who committed Benedict Arnold, as well as Major John Andre, who was a British officer who was instrumental in trying to effect the revolt by Benedict Arnold against Washington. And she was instrumental. It's believed that she was instrumental in stopping that. Now, there was also a woman, Hannah, who had 7 sons, and she was also captured and was told to, go along to get along, and she was threatened with death and the death of her children, and she chose death. And in the merit of her self-sacrifice, it said that all of her sons went on to be priests, high priests in the temple. Now, there's another story that I just recently found out about that I just feel is unbelievable. I didn't know about it before. So for some of you, maybe both of these stories will be new. And for some of you, maybe only one. I'm not sure which one. So I'll start with the Hanukkah story, because that was the one I already knew. And the surprise for me was the revolutionary story. So there was a woman named Yehudis, and she was living in a city that was that was under siege by the by the Greeks, and no one was being allowed in or out of the city. And in fact, even the Jews weren't allowing other people out. It's too dangerous. What's going to be? So this woman, Yehudis, she says, "I've got an idea," because women are good that way. And she tells them, look, just give me, they were thinking of surrendering even. She says, look, give me a chance. I'm going to go do this. And there's different versions of the story. I'm just going to kind of condense it into one overall narrative. She goes to the enemy camp, and it's questionable whether she was posing as a bride, or maybe she was a bride that was taken by the soldiers or by the general in order to violate her before her wedding night, which was done during the times of the Chanukah battle. One of the reasons why they were not so happy with the Greek rule. Or she could have just been saying to them that she was going to provide them information in order to take the city by force. Either way, she gets into the general's tent, and she brings along with her some cheese and lots of wine, and the general eats the cheese. He becomes very thirsty, naturally, and she starts giving him wine, and he drinks and he drinks and he drinks until he passes out. Which, by the way, part part of the reason why we eat dairy foods on Hanukkah specifically is because of this story. She fed him the cheese. So, he's passed out. What does she do? She takes a sword, if it's his sword or she had a sword, whatever. She takes a sword, chops off the guy's head, not for the faint of heart, puts it in the bag that she had all the food in. As she leaves, she tells the guards outside, he's resting, don't bother him. And they're, kind of snickering because they think they know what was going on in there. She goes back to the city. She gives the head of the general to the guards in her city, to the soldiers, and they put it on a spike above the city. In the morning, the soldiers see the head of their general on the city walls, see that he's headless, dead in his tent. They freak out, they retreat, and the city is saved. Pretty amazing story, and it actually has a parallel in the Revolutionary War. What is that story? So there was a woman whose name was Nancy Hart. This is, I want to just read to you a little edition of some of Nancy Hart's life, a little brief portion from the National Women's History Museum. So during the Revolution, while her husband was away, Hart managed their farm, though she often snuck off to spy on the British. Dressed as a man, she would enter British camps, pretending to be feeble-minded to gain information, which she handed off to the Patriots. Hart also engaged in the war, and may have been present at the Battle of Kettle Creek on February 14th, 1779. But wait, there's more. The British frequently stopped at the Hart house, keeping an eye on the patriotic woman. In one instance, Hart's daughter noticed a Tory spying through a hole in the wall. Hart was making soap and threw a boiling ladleful through the crack, scalding the spy. She and her daughter then tied him up and turned him over to the Patriots. I thought that was pretty cool. Now here's the kicker. Hart's most famous act involved 5 or 6 British soldiers who killed her last turkey and demanded that she cook it for them. She devised a plan to get the soldiers drunk on her corn liquor, take their guns, and hold them captive. Hart sent her daughter, Suki, to get some water and to use a hidden conch shell to alert neighbors of the British presence. While the soldiers ate and drank, Hart began sneaking their guns out through a hole in the wall. Caught holding the third gun, she drew it and threatened to shoot. When a soldier rushed at her, she killed him and wounded another. The rest surrendered. I thought that was awesome. Aside from the fact that it's just a really cool story. She was from Georgia, I believe. And aside from the fact it's a cool story, clearly, I'm sure you could see the parallels to the Hanukkah story of Yehudis. So that was just really amazing. And a final comparison that I want to make is the enlistment of another world power. Now, we all know that the Americans used the French against their British enemy because the French and the British were notorious enemies. And it was also the French wanted a piece of the action in the colonies. They figured, listen, if they can kick the British out of the colonies, they can get some action for themselves. And so what happened is you have, I believe it was Benjamin Franklin, if I'm not mistaken, who brokered this alliance with the French, and the French were able to give them supplies that were desperately needed and really turned the tide of the war. If it weren't for the French, it could certainly be argued that the Americans would not have won. Likewise, the Maccabees brokered a truce, or not a truce, a treaty with the Romans. The Romans were certainly looming on the horizon, and in the 160s BCE had sacked Corinth. So this is just after the Hanukkah story, sacked Corinth and really began taking over the Greek Empire. And so you had Jason, the son of Eliezer, one of the Maccabee brothers. He goes and brokers this treaty with the Romans that I believe it happens after the main Hanukkah story, But the people kind of have this attitude that, well, once the Hanukkah story happened and they rededicated the temple and the miracle with the oil and everything, that was over. That was the end, and they were just hunky-dory until the Romans came along. Well, it's not exactly so simple. It dragged on for almost a decade afterwards, if not even longer in some parts, that you had the Greeks constantly trying to regain, to save face and regain the territory. And this treaty with the Romans really helped the Jews fend off that territory. But of course, since they had the treaty with the Romans, as soon as the Greeks fell, who do you think took over the territory? The Romans. And back to square one until you have the Roman revolts, which did not end as well for the Jews, unfortunately. So there you have it. When it comes to the Revolutionary War, Jews did it first. Since we're talking about Hanukkah, I'd like to share a few thoughts about it. One is, what exactly was the miracle? There's a famous question that goes along the lines of, if the oil was supposed to last for 1 day anyway, and it lasted for 8 days, so really the miracle was only for 7 days, not for 8 days. So why do we light 8 candles? And there are a myriad of answers given to this question, such as one candle is because they won the battle, one candle is because they found the cruse of oil, and so on. There's many different answers to this question. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe answers it in a very profound way, in that when he asks about the miracle of the oil, he goes through different reasonings on the miracle of the oil itself. For instance, some of the answers given for why we light for 8 days is because it was some sort of super oil. It only burned 1/8 of the amount of time. 1/8 of the amount of oil burned during the time that it would normally burn the whole thing. So when they checked on it the next morning, there was only 1/8 gone instead of a whole day's worth. Another answer is that it would miraculously refill the next day. And there's various reasons why the Rebbe doesn't prefer these answers. For the super oil, the whole point of lighting the menorah in the best way is to use regular virgin pressed olive oil, not some kind of super powerful magic oil. Likewise, when it comes to refilling the next day, then the next day it wasn't oil. It was godly produced oil, right? They found the oil, they used it up the first day, and then the next day it's this miraculous oil. It's not oil that was pressed and gotten by people. It wasn't a regular natural oil. It was a miraculous godly oil. And there's other reasons as well that Rebbe goes through, and he discounts them for one reason or another. And finally, the Rebbe says that in order for it to work in the best possible way, you had the oil burning as natural oil, and it was consumed as natural oil, and simultaneously was not consumed. Much like the burning bush that Moses saw, it was on fire, but was not being consumed. So here you had the oil in a slightly different way, not being consumed, but at the same time burning as natural oil. Now, the question is, well, how is that possible? That would take a miracle of God. Yes, exactly. It's a miracle of God. And that's why it was an actual miracle every single day of Hanukkah. All 8 days. Not just 7. Not just because one day it would have burned naturally. No. Even that first day was a miraculous burning. This type of miraculous burning. And it's that miracle that we're celebrating during the 8 days of Hanukkah, primarily. Aside from the victory in battle and so on. And in the same vein, when we are looking to see what is Hanukkah teaching us, what was the big deal, right? They win the battle. That's a tremendous feat of military whatever. And they find this oil this one jar of oil, and it lasts for 8 days. What is this all about? I don't understand. First of all, so they don't have oil. They don't have oil. Why does God have to make a miracle? Why does God have to do this weird thing where the oil is found and you've got miracle oil burning, and whichever answer you go with, it seems so superfluous. What's going on over here? Well, the answer is that's what it's all about. It's about that one cruse of oil. When you look deep into yourself, every single Jew has that pach shemen, has that cruse of oil buried deep within. We call it in Yiddish the pintele yid, the essential Jewish spark within each and every one of us. And when we can tap into that essential spark, that bit of just raw, untapped godliness that's within us, then we can shine in this world like we never thought possible. We could do more than we could imagine, and we could accomplish tremendous feats of personal self-sacrifice, of moral fortitude, of standing up against all odds and being proud of who we are and experiencing and exercising our Judaism in a way that we didn't necessarily think was possible. I hear a lot, from Jewish people, well, I'm doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can, Rabbi. Which, for them, I really think that that's true. I really think that people are trying the best that they feel that they can do. But I feel that they can do so much more. Maybe they don't feel. I think they truly feel, yes, I'm doing the best I can, but they're not doing the best that they absolutely can. Not because they're just wimping out or anything. No, it's because they need to tap in to who they really are, to their true essence. And then they'll be able to do so much more than they really thought possible when it comes to Jewish expression. We're also living in the middle of nowhere, just like many other people. We don't have access to abundance of kosher food and Jewish infrastructure. And it's not because my wife and I think, are such tremendous people or such extra special Jews, but because we're tapping in to the Rebbe. We're tapping into his koyach, his power and his ability, and that links us directly to God. Not as an intermediary sort of way, but just more as an inspirational sort of way. It's hard to be inspired by something abstract, but when you see someone like the Rebbe, who is such a special holy person, you see someone like that doing such amazing, tremendous work around the world for Jews around the world, you can't help but be inspired and then reach inside yourself and tap into the godliness that's within yourself. So that's the program. Wish everyone a freilichen Chanukah, a happy Chanukah, and I hope you celebrate all 8 nights. Don't forget to light your menorahs right at sunset, except for on Friday night. Don't forget to do a little before because it's going to be the Sabbath. And also when it comes to Saturday, wait until it's dark, so it's after the Sabbath. And I wish you all a happy, healthy Hanukkah and all the best. Have a great week.